and there's not a lot of organizations that have that capability. I mean, yeah, Esri's got it, but then you're locked into an Esri solution. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's, to me, the key to any successful mobile application, deployment, mobile GIS application deployment, is all the back end. It's not that difficult to put something together to collect data in the field. It's how do you get the original data that you're going to be updating into the field, and then how do you get your data back. And, as you said, that's where SRI has really excelled, and why they have a solution for all these platforms out there. It's why there's multiple Windows mobile solutions, there's Android solutions, Windows Phone solutions, iOS solutions. It's because they've invested in that backbone, all that server technology that both allows you to configure everything and manage everything, but also knows how to send and receive messages across the cloud very efficiently, how to deal with broken connections and all of that. I don't really know of other organizations that have that kind of infrastructure. Now, on individual projects or one-off type projects, it's easy for someone like myself as a developer to build that connectivity, and there's lots of server technology. I could build a pretty straightforward server that can send and receive data for that particular project, to any operating system, but it's going to be a one-off type solution. Most users or organizations are not willing or able to invest in that. So if you're looking for, hey, I need to get something off the shelf that I can go out there and on this device or this device or this device, at the moment you're kind of limited to what Esri offers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to say for a standalone application because, for example, if I'm a person who is assigned to, map all the utility poles in a municipality, if I use a standalone solution and I use, TerraSync or ServCE or ArcPad or whatever, I can go out and collect all that data over a week period of time and download it, and I don't have to have any of this back-end stuff going on at all in terms of a cloud-based application. I can just go out and do my work, and I could buy a piece of hardware and a piece of software this week and be out mapping next week, and it'd be pretty straightforward to do that. But if you're going to do a cloud-based kind of system, it's a bit more complicated than that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I think people tend to underestimate that whole back end. It's not just a database sitting on a server. There's a whole lot that goes into the back end to make all of that data available and synchronize seamlessly.
Okay, Craig, so what about open source versus commercial software? I mean, there's actually some open source, and I wrote an article about this, or a couple articles of last month, I think it was, about open source mobile GIS software like GBC or other apps out there. But and I've had discussions with others, and I think you as well, in the past about this open source versus commercial. I mean, in my opinion, there's open source offers some sort of low barrier to entry for, let's say a local government or a small organization that doesn't have any capital expenditure, doesn't really understand the benefits that they'll get from mobile GIS, and maybe an open source would give them a inexpensive solution for implementing such a system where then they can start to see the benefits of it and then start to budget capital dollars based on some preliminary results from the open source stuff.
That's an interesting take of open source as kind of an entryway technology into mobile.js, because it's not very expensive, and if you have some interns whose time you have access to who are interested to push them to get things going as kind of a proof of concept or entryway, and then you move on to some more commercial software. And to me, with open source, your big investment there is time. So if you have interns or people who are willing to work for low cost or for free, who are enthusiastic about it, it's absolutely a good way to go. With commercial software, your big investment is money, but also keep in mind it's not a small investment in time. I mean, there's training, there's a lot of setup involved, there's keeping current on the software. So it's not like when you buy commercial software, you're not spending a lot of time on it as well. but that's by far your big investment is that initial upfront cost. But what it comes down to, and I've told you the story, Eric, as well, is that when I've worked for Esri and other software firms, is when it comes down to releasing software, they kind of go into this war room environment where people's bonuses are threatened, and people are grilled for why their bugs aren't fixed, and they're grilled to come up with time frames and alternative plans, and documentation people are grilled, and there's this whole process that doesn't necessarily happen in an open source environment where people get to a point where they go, hey, this is good enough, I've lost interest, I don't want to do that extra 2%, that extra lot of work to get that 2% achievement results to make the software completely bug-free or better. And not that commercial software doesn't have bugs, but the bugs that are left in commercial software go through a very generally intensive process where it's decided the cost-benefit of fixing them. Whereas in open source, it's, well, if somebody's interested, they might work on this module until something else interests them.
Right. I agree. There's that last 10%, you're right, where everybody's getting threatened to be fired and all that sort of drama that happens. That's typically what happens when you're getting ready to push a product out the door, whether it's hardware or software. I understand that. And that's a great point, I think, that you made. Mobile GIS data collection software is a niche business, and so standalone mobile GIS software is slow to migrate to Android and iOS. That's what we sort of touched on before. Smartphone cloud apps have garnered much software. I think much of the software development resources that I've heard of, because folks need to get in that space, or developers want to get in that space, and they're playing around with it to some extent. But they still aren't as strong as the standalone apps yet. And then something we haven't touched on yet, Craig, has been the cloud-based, HTML5 environment, which is interesting because that may be a solution for cross-platform operating system. But it's you basically use a browser, right? And as long as it's HTML5 compliant, it doesn't matter if it's Android or Windows or iOS, right?
Yeah, it's actually something we're looking at doing. Is you still would need to build some kind of very thin application that would be a native iOS and Android and Windows Phone application. But beyond that, it would essentially be consuming through the cloud smart web pages that would cache data.
So next, great. I'm going to put out stick out another poll here. Is in the future, and I'm really interested to see what your response is here. Do you think your organization will be using cloud-based mobile GIS apps or standalone GIS apps? Well, look at the poll results. So, cloud-based is sort of trending. I don't know. What do you think, Craig? I think I think at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a hybrid type of solution. I really do. I think connectivity.
Yeah, I think it just has to be. I mean, the real world is not a constantly connected world, even in the best of environments. And the mobile GIS world is not necessarily the cleanest environment to work in. It's people under sewers and in rivers and in canyons and stuff like that. So it has to be hybrid, in my opinion. Hello?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute there. So I'm going to hit a couple of audience questions. I think there's some good ones there, and I want to make sure we hit those before we sign off here. One of the comments was the problem with using smartphones for GIS is that it needs to be your phone first, and there's a big risk if it's damaged or drained battery when you use it for GIS that you lost your phone capability. And that's sort of the way I feel too. Is that my phone is my phone first. I can use it for calendar functionality. I can use it for email sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's my phone, and that's what I need to. When I'm out somewhere and I find myself checking email too much and it's killing my battery, I end up preserving it because I want to save my battery for phone calls and that sort of thing. I think there's something to be said for that, and I feel somewhat of the same way. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of the same point I make a lot of times with people who use integrated devices. Is that if your camera and your GPS and your Wi-Fi and all these other things are running on your device, then your overall device isn't going to last very long. Whereas if you have individual components, then each of them can have their own battery. And again, you find yourself turning the GPS off or turning capabilities off that you'd like to have in order to conserve battery. So yeah, absolutely, it makes sense that it'd be the same kind of paradigm in the smartphone world. Another
audience question. We currently use iPACs running ArcPad. I need a new device. Considering the iPACs are disappearing, what can you recommend? Android doesn't support ArcPad. My preference would be a smartphone. I guess there's some smartphones out there running Windows Mobile, right? Still, you can probably still get. I'm not sure. I haven't looked.
Oh yeah. There are quite a few still running Windows Mobile 6.5.
But then the problem there is, you have to have the right. If it's AT&T or T-Mobile or Sprint or whoever else. I mean, you have to. Do you really want to switch wireless providers just to get the phone that's going to run ArcPad? I mean, that's sort of the challenge because not all. You're going to be pretty limited on the number of phones that are running Windows Mobile that can run ArcPad, right?
Yeah, pretty much. You're looking for something used at this point. Like an AT&T Tilt or something from a few years back. The HTC Tilt. And as you were saying earlier, these days the trend really is away from phones with Windows Mobile and more dedicated industrial devices.
And then another comment was, are mobile devices fast enough in terms of processing power, and do they have enough storage to work with and carry enough data to be used to edit and add GIS data when disconnected? I think generally speaking, I think the power of these of mobile phones are, it's sort of like the Moore's Law thing, right? I don't know if it's that fast, but certainly the mobile phones of today are a lot stronger than they were back in, 2 years ago or probably even a year ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And storage is becoming a non-issue as storage cards get bigger and bigger and more devices allow you to add on storage in addition to the gigabytes that they give you out of the box.
So what I wanted to hit towards the end here is, and we can go to 5 minutes over, Matt, so we'll just go to 1:05, I'm going to cover this project that Craig did. He did this, and maybe you can talk about it, Craig, but it was a simple digital photo, video, or photo integration using the inexpensive Garmin unit, and I'll sort of let you take it from here, Craig, and summarize it.
Sure, yeah, this was part of a pilot project that we've been working on where the requirement was for completely non-computer literate people at a very low cost to be able to go out and map the route that they take to acquire food sources. It's a nutrition-based project, and so they're trying to look at how rural people, acquire food and get to food, and how that relates to their overall nutrition. And so, with that requirement, we looked at what's the simplest way. Oh, and also they were to go out and take pictures as they go of how they get to their food sources. So if you take a bus, you might take a picture of a bus stop. You get to the grocery store, you take a picture of the grocery store, and they wanted to be able to make it that simple. So what we did was we took the Garmin Oregon 550, which is a very simple device. You can configure the main screen, so it just has a few buttons, and all they do is start a track. They start walking and press the camera button and take pictures along the way. And when they're done, they end the track. That's basically the entire user experience. If you jump to the next slide.
Okay.
You can see, so at the end they give that data back to a coordinator, or they give the device to a coordinator. The coordinator plugs it into a laptop, and up pops the software you see on the screen that basically interrogates the device, links all the tracks up to the associated photos, puts some header information, and then they zip and email that up to an overall coordinator. That coordinator then takes that data, runs it through an ArcGIS extension, presses a couple buttons. If you go to the next slide, you can see essentially what they have are all of their routes are brought out and color-coded in ArcMap, and they can go to any one of the pictures, hover over it, have it pop up it'll automatically pop up a photo from that spot. They can resize it, move it around, and as they drag it, arrows automatically drawn. They basically figure out which photos tell the best story of that route, and then capture that all as a map. And they use that map then to tell the story and analyze the data. So
I think one of the neatest parts about this, I think, is that these aren't GIS technicians that are doing this. These aren't any specialists at all. These are just citizens out in the community, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And they have very little training, no knowledge, no GIS background.
And here was the last slide. I don't know if you have anything to discuss in there.
I think that was just a zoomed out view of So the idea is that the individual end users who are basically volunteering to have their habits looked at, have a very low kind of technical entry, and the volunteer coordinators who gather the data have a very low technical entry. They connect a device and press a button and send an email, and the people with the GIS skills are the people actually finally at the end getting all that data, and we built them some pretty simple tools to be able to organize and analyze the data and tell the story.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Craig. Hey, folks, got to sign off now. We're at about 64 minutes.